Welcome back, everyone. This is the Victory Podcast, and I'm your host, Steve McGrath. If you haven't already, I have to ask you to go ahead and like, share, subscribe this podcast. If you haven't already, I'd greatly appreciate it. And this week, I'm pleased to bring you Carlos Emmons. Carlos had an 11-year career in the NFL coming out of Arkansas State when he was an all-conference player. He was drafted in 1996 by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and after 4 years there, he played 4 years with the Eagles, and after that, he finished his career with the Giants. When it was all said and done in the NFL, Carlos went on to earn his MBA. He then opened his own restaurant, Bar 51 in Atlanta, Georgia. I'd highly encourage you to check it out if you haven't. And before I get to that conversation, I have to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by Team Builder. Team Builder provides strength and conditioning software to more than 500 high school football programs nationwide, as well as the NFL. So whether you write your own programs, have a full-time strength coach, or you need training programs, Team Builder can make your weight room more efficient, more accountable, and smarter when it comes to measuring your team's progress. Right now, Team Builder is offering a free 10-week spread offense tempo training program when you start a 14-day free trial at teambuilder.com with promo code VICTORY. Now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Carlos Emmons. Carlos, thanks so much for coming on, man. How are you doing today?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I know we're going to be in a little bit of a time crunch today, so I want to just jump right into it with you. Looking at your career, Arkansas State, you were an all-conference player. Can you just tell us a little bit about what high school was like for you? How did you get to Arkansas? Because my understanding was you kind of were a little bit of a late bloomer, played a little cornerback earlier in high school, but you got bigger, you filled out more. And how did it come to be that you'd get to Arkansas and ultimately playing, a linebacker rush position type of deal?
Like you said, I was a late bloomer. I grew really late. I grew 3.5 inches just during the summer between my junior and senior year, and probably another 1.5 inches during my senior year. So I grew really late. So I transitioned from there, like starting at cornerback in high school, then moving to safety. Then probably the first week of the season, my senior year, first time playing a little outside linebacker. And then from there, I started hearing from Arkansas State. I had never heard of Arkansas State, actually. But they were there so much and recruiting me and our quarterback. And I had some conversations with my coach, and he said, school that's there showing you the most love is the ones that's going to give you the most opportunity. So I gave them a look and ended up at Arkansas State.
So if you didn't have that growth spurt, do you think you would have made it? Were you thinking, hey, I can make it to the NFL? Or did it just sort of that happen, the attention came, and next thing you knew, it was a reality?
I wasn't even thinking I was going to make it then. It was just a dream at that point. I'm just thinking, like, can I just get to the point to play in college? So I think maybe after my redshirt freshman year of college, I started thinking about it a little bit more. And as it went on, I started feeling like it could be a reality.
Gotcha. So because, again, a late bloomer, you do make it to Arkansas and you're just trying to get yourself ready to play college football. And you make it to be an all-conference player. What was that? Is that transition just more physically get into your body and grow into this new frame you have? Or was it more mental, like feeling that you're actually able to compete on this level?
I think at that point it was physical, because just the way the politics of sports are set up, they initially look at size, speed, strength. So even if you can play, you can look at all across the board with sports. You can be a small basketball player, you can be the greatest player ever, and they're like, he's too short. Like football is the same way. Like you can be a great player, and they're like, oh, he's too small. That's why you get smaller guys that have to change that narrative every year. So I think initially you don't get the looks because you don't have that prototype size. So once I got the size, then people started noticing the playing ability.
Gotcha. So based off our conversation thus far, though, you getting drafted by the Steelers was a little bit of a surprise. Did you have any expectation? Do you remember draft day at all for you? Were you expecting a call or just sort of hoping for one?
I remember. I grew up a Steelers fan my whole life. So I actually didn't work out for anyone except the Steelers. So,
Oh,
and
wow.
the only reason the Steelers even heard about me was I had my linebacker coach my freshman year of college was Dennis Winston. He used to play for the Steelers. They got that coaching staff got fired after the first year, and he took a defense coordinator job at Grambling. So the Steelers were down there checking out a guy on that team. It's 4 years later. He told them they have a guy at Arkansas State no one knows about. Y'all need to go check him out. And they came because of that. So, like, little things that happen in your life, you don't realize they're going to affect you in the future. And they actually did. Because actually, without him making that call, no one would have knew about it.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Just that little moment right there that aligns everything for you. All right, so you do get drafted though in '96, seventh round. I've heard you say previously that you know you weren't even getting a chance. You felt rookie training camp to even show your talents because you're just seventh round guy, right? You're one of the last guys that are trying to make the roster. But what was some of the veteran advice? I believe it was something along the lines of, do what you can on special teams, shine in individual drills and practice. So is that true? Is there any other sort of looking back at it, things that you did to make yourself stand out?
Yeah, that was pretty much it. Like, I think they always tell rookies, you have to be good on special teams, things like that. And I can remember having a conversation with LeVon Kirkland, and he was saying, like, man, you can play, just keep doing what you're doing or whatever. And he was like, but you got to make the team on special teams. I'm like, they're not even putting me in on special teams. So he was like, well, that's a problem. So,
do just speaking of Levon, and even if it's not him, do you have a memory of like that first time a veteran looked at you and kind of gave you that, like, you know what, you can do this?
I think coming from guys like him and with guys like Greg Lord and on the team, like he spent a lot of time talking to me about things at that point, and it was like a dynamic on the Steelers team at that time. They were like, if Greg talks to you, that's a good thing. Greg was mean. Like, he didn't talk to people, especially rookies. He might say they're not. So once Greg started talking to me a lot, I started feeling a little more comfortable. So I just took it from there.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, outside of that, I mean, Rod Woodson, Chad Brown. I think even towards the end of your time there, there's a young Joey Porter, Mike Vrabel, guys that go on to have big careers. Do you have any just sort of thoughts about your time in Pittsburgh, the guys that were there? Was there anything special about that group, coaches included, like Dick LeBeau and Cowher?
Yeah, I think just playing under LeBeau as defense coordinator starting out, he was such a great coach and a great man. Just just getting to play with him, and then all the guys we had at linebacker coming through there, like you said, even after those guys, with me coming in, and then Vrabel, and then Joey, and guys like that. I mean, we had such a close knit group that we just really enjoyed playing the game.
Now, so close knit group is a huge piece of success on the field, but was there anything that you can think of that sort of guided the principles by which the Steelers were using to pick these guys? Was it a certain height speed type of deal? Was it a personality thing? I mean, they just hit on so many of you guys, yourself included. Was there any sort of tangible thing that you can point to being like, this was the type of guy they wanted and why they could do it over and over again?
I think they were probably one of the first teams that started going after guys that were tweeners in a sense, where they were a little bit too small to play defensive end, and but they were kind of small linebackers and can run and cover. So I think they were the first one to put that together. Like, we need, because they were playing a 3-4. Most teams had 4-3 at that time, so they needed guys who could rush and drop and do other things on the field. So I think they were one of the first teams to start recruiting that in between player who can do a lot of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, looking back at your career, your last 2 years with the Steelers, right? You really get playing time, particularly the last year. Your sacks, tackles for loss, things that are going to get the attention of people other teams around the league, those numbers go way up. Do you have any, I guess this is sort of two parts here, but any thoughts on, did something click for you in years 3 and 4 versus 1 and 2? And just ultimately, what was that decision like for you to go elsewhere?
No, actually, by circumstance, I ended up playing a lot from the start. So I was one of the only rookies that were playing a lot. Like me, you had John Whitman and Orpheus Roy at the time, like played a lot on special teams, and he got a little. But we were pretty much the only ones that were actually playing, and a lot of that happened with injuries. Beginning of the season, Greg got hurt, and then I think Steve Conley got hurt. Someone else got hurt at the time. So it was like I went from the first game not dressing for the game to the second game starting on dime and nickel. So I actually ended up playing a lot early on. It was just I was playing behind veteran guys. So once they came back, I really just waited my turn. So first 2 years I was playing like third down and special teams, and then the last 2 years I ended up starting.
Got it. That decision to sign with Philly, though, how hard was that for you? And why Philly? Did you really want to be Pittsburgh? Did it really matter to you? Just any
No, it
thoughts
was
on?
just it was a the by that time I understood the business of the game, and I had a conversation with Joey. I was like, "You're too good to be on the bench." And I said, "So now they can't keep all of us." So I said, I'll be a free agent next year. I said Jason's contract is coming up, Jason Gilden. I said if they re-sign Jason, then they're gonna let me go, and you're coming up. If they don't re-sign Jason, they're gonna re-sign me, and it's gonna be me and you. I know that's how the game works. So when they re-signed Jason, I told him like, your job next year. So I knew I was gone.
It's so easy to say now. I mean, I assume it's easy for you to say, but what's that realization like? Like, does that make you bitter, kind of realizing that at the time, or do you just sort of
No,
take it as
I
what it
wasn't
is?
bitter. I knew that I had talked to veteran guys. I like soaked all in everything they say. So I know it's the politics of the game. They can't pay everybody. Why
Yeah,
pay all three of us and only two can start? So
sure.
I knew that if they gave Jason the contract extension, I wasn't going to be there. So
Gotcha.
there was no hard feelings when I left. I mean, the only hard feelings were leaving the team you grew up loving. But other than that, I understood it. I understood the business of it.
Yeah, for sure. But you do go to Philly, and I mean, you still have a great, next part of your career in Philly with another great group of talented guys. Looking back, do you have any sort of, if you could kind of compare a little bit, Andy Reid, his coaching regime at the time, Jim Johnson, Leslie Frazier, John Harbaugh's there, McDermott, Ron Rivera, Pat Shermer, guys that have great coaching careers ahead of them. Did you see anything about that group that would make you think that they would have future success outside of Philly?
I saw that they had a lot of young talent, and they had a young quarterback in Donovan McNabb who I believe was going to like do great things, which he ended up doing. So I think that part is what kind of drew me to it. When I went on the visit to them, actually it was the first visit I went on. I signed on the visit, so it was like I never got a chance to visit anybody else. So um, I mean, I had a good vibe when I went there, and I actually had a great time in Philly.
Awesome. And believe there's so much that I'd love to dig into there, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of jump to the Giants era, the last stage of your career. Now, your second time going through free agency, couple more years under your belt. Did you change a little as to what you looked for and where you were going to go next? And I mean, you came off of being defensive MVP in 03. You had a great last season before having this opportunity. Do you just remember like what stuck out to you about the Giants and what you wanted to look for?
Um, Actually, with that, it was like I said, it was circumstances again. I broke my leg at the end of my last year. I think coming in that year, I was going to be the top linebacker on the free agent market, and then I broke my leg at the end of the year in a game I really shouldn't have even played in, but I just did it because I didn't want to let the guys down. It was a major game for us, so I think that all led to me going to the Giants because the Giants signed me when I was still injured. Like I wasn't even ready to pass the physical, so in that case, you're in a situation where you have to take the deal when everyone else is like, wait, you can pass the physical. At that time, the the teams have spent their big money in free agency, and now you're left in limbo. So it wasn't a situation where I was willing to wait.
Shades of Kevin Durant, right? Playing in a game maybe he shouldn't have, gets hurt, and now you're
Yeah.
faced free agency. But very interesting. So, again, though, your third stop, another great group of coaches, Tom Coughlin. You have Antonio Pierce, Strahan, Kiwanuka, Osi. I mean, the front seven that you played with there was great. So just now looking back at this point between the three teams, you were always surrounded by talent. Is there anything that you can point to say this is what made good front sevens, particular traits amongst teammates, or anything with the coaches that made separating the good ones from the bad ones? Just any sort of thoughts on it?
I think a lot of times it's all about injuries. When I first got to the Giants, like you said, we had tons of talent. But if you look at that first 2 years when I was there, everyone was hurt. We had the worst luck with injuries ever in those 2 years. So it was like we went into playoffs my third year, I think, there. My second year there. And everybody was hurt. We were signing guys off the street to start in the playoff game. So like when you get that kind of luck, it's not going to work out for you. So injuries kept hampering the team at that time. And once I retired, you saw that once they got everybody back healthy, they went and upset the Patriots and won it.
So I had to ask, of course, you had career-ending back surgery, so it wasn't even a question for you. But how do you digest that? Like, man, if I could have just stuck it out one more year, I could have been with them.
Yeah, it was a bittersweet thing. It went from I was watching the Super Bowl, everybody was like, "Oh, the Patriots gonna win." I'm like, "No," I'm telling everybody before the game. I'm like, when they played that last game, that did it for them. So it was like I'm cheering when they win the game. I'm running around the house, and then it dawned on me that I'm not playing. And then it was like I had two different feelings. Like I went from like extremely happy to almost depressed because all my life, all I did was dream about winning the Super Bowl. So I literally was almost going through depression, I think. Like I sat in the house in the dark the next day watching the parade, every interview, just torturing myself. And I can remember like, man, this is like killing me. I'm like sick to my stomach. Like I really felt sick because I started thinking like maybe I'll try to come back. Like because I always wanted the Super Bowl. That was my whole point. I just wanted to try to come back and like try to get with a team that can win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I can imagine, right? Isn't that every kid's dream? And the fact that you were that close to it, by no means am I trying to rub it in, but I can understand, just from doing this podcast, that guys can struggle with identifying who they are after retirement, and just sort of, you're faced with trying to deal with that. Plus, this is now on your lap. I mean, it's no small task to kind of sort through that and come out positive on the other end.
Yeah, that first year out is tough anyway.
Yeah.
First year out of the game is tough because you're so used to that schedule. So my first year out when I was rehabbing, I would literally get up. I have a gym in my home, but I would literally get up, pack a bag, like almost like I'm going traveling. Like take everything I need to shower, get back dressed. I would go to the gym, work out, plan stuff during the whole day when I would have been at work because I was trying to fill that time in, trying to deal with the fact that I wasn't playing anymore. And I didn't even realize I was doing it. And it took like a friend of mine to be like, you're going through it, right? I'm like, what do you mean? They were like, you literally are running a routine that's occupying all the time that you typically would be at work. But I didn't even realize I was doing it.
Yeah,
So it's tough.
It's 11 years in the NFL of like hard wiring that you're trying to overwrite. So yeah, it's I can understand, but you know what? You're able to channel that. And as we're getting closer to wrapping this up here, how did you find your way into going down the path of being an entrepreneur, but B, specifically going into the restaurant bar type of industry? Like, how did that all come together for you?
Well, I was a business major, so I always knew I wanted to own my own business at some point. So after that, I started trying to figure out what I wanted to do after the fact. Because I couldn't just sit around. So I was like, I need something to invest in or get involved in. And I started looking into the restaurant industry, and it led from there. And I opened a franchise called Wet Willies, and I ran that for 8.5, 9 years, and just recently I changed it to my own franchise. I started my own franchise. It's called B51. It's short for Bar 51, but it's called B51. It's in the same location at 2450 Piedmont Road in Atlanta, and that's been going well. So I'm just looking forward to like continuing that.
That's awesome. And we've had Gary Brackett on, who took over the ownership of Stacked Pickle. So he's the only other guy that we've had on that went that route of franchising and doing its own the bar space. But just one thing that stuck out to me that I was reading about you and leading up to this was just that you said from the jump that you didn't want to waste your scholarship. You got that education. You want to put it to good use. So the fact that you had something in mind is so huge. But I just wanted to point out this one quote, and it reads, "I started to take more of a leadership role in football, and I realized how much it meant to younger players when I told them how great they could be." So, as we get to the end here, at what point did you realize that you could have such a positive impact, and how has that kind of guided you in your life post playing days?
I think I realized that early on when I saw how the game could be. When I saw how some veterans wouldn't help you, like some veterans would tell you the wrong play, like intentionally, and mess you up, like in practice, because you realize then, like, this is a business. These guys are worried about their jobs. So a lot of them weren't trying to help you. So I always prided myself on doing the opposite. I'm gonna try to teach the young guys under me everything I can possibly teach them. And someone asked me why I was doing that at one point, and I said, if he's good enough to take my job, he needs to be playing. So I wasn't worried about them taking my job. And that from everybody that played, like from when Vrabel was there and Joey was there and all of that, I still was on the field as great as those guys were, because I felt like I was going to do what it took to stay on the field. So I never worried about those things.
That's awesome. And my last question for you is, do you just have any last piece of advice on getting to where you are today? So to any young listeners out there that want to make it to the NFL and even just have success in life, is there anything that you'd like to say to them?
I think you just got to believe in yourself, and like, get rid of the doubters, get rid of the negative people in your life, and just you got to grind. There's a lot of work involved. You can't sit around and wait on a handout. You got to get out there and grind and work for it. And I think if they do that, they're gonna give themselves a chance.
Awesome. Well, Carlos, I know this was condensed. Thank you so much for taking the time and going through all of that with us. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Thanks for having me.